Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on unlocking the potential of CROs and research sites partnership to drive patient centricity. I am Francesca Properzi, the Director of Research at DT Consulting, an Indogene company. I've been working with this company for 3 years now, working on investigators and patient challenges, and also on digital maturity. And it's a pleasure for me today to be joined by Deepak Gandotra. He is working as a Senior Director at Indogene on digital patient recruitment and engagement. So, hi Deepak, I leave to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Great to be with you. Hi, everyone. As Francesca mentioned, I'm Deepak, part of the clinical team at Indogene with a focus on digital patient recruitment and engagement. I've been in the industry for about 15 years with the experience of designing and executing experience for stakeholders across the clinical stakeholders. Thank you.
So I'll start to share the screen, and in the meantime, I can give you some information about the structure of the webinar. We will have an half-an-hour discussion showing some research findings and also sharing our experience with clients and with the industry. And at the end, we will have 15 minutes of question and answers, but please feel free to type in your questions throughout the webinar. And we will take those questions that are really relevant to what we're discussing. We'll try to take them while we talk. Otherwise, we'll do our best to answer all questions during at the end of the session. So one important thing maybe to explain is why did we choose this topic? I think me and Deepak had many discussions around it, many interesting insights from clients on why collaboration with CROs and the research sites is actually a very important topic, especially when it comes to digital transformation and to digital adoption. One of the reasons that we all know that digital technologies have really the potential to increase that clinical trial success rates, especially by addressing all those patient recruitment, patient engagement issues, and delivering more patient-centric trials. But so why they're not delivering on that potential yet? So I think the first point of this discussion is really acknowledging the complexity of the system. This is not an easy process, not an easy industry. There are many players involved. So at one end, we have sponsors that are organizing the trials, but then in midway, we have clinical research sites that are executing that research. And at the very end, the most important hand are participants to trials. And all this is enabled by other key players, which are digitally enabled patient recruitment and engagement companies and CROs. So when it comes to digital innovation, everybody has his own technology, and everybody wants to implement what it's easier for them. And sometimes this results in actually delays rather than improvement of the efficiency of your process. And I think we all acknowledge that when it comes to innovation, working in silos is definitely not a good recipe. So, Deepak, what do you think about this?
I completely agree, Francesca. You and I have been part of many conversations where we have seen the best of trial designs failing because of execution level challenges or otherwise due to totally avoidable reasons. So in today's sessions, we are going to talk about some short-term trial-specific tactics that the audience can straight away implement if they are in the middle of a clinical trial or if they are planning one as, say, a biotech sponsor company, as well as some long-term strategic directions that we would like the audience to start thinking of. Great, congrats if they're already doing so, but from a portfolio point of view, we would like to leave them with some tips and tricks, so to speak, for a long-term portfolio. But as we present our research finding, I think one question that I often get asked is, will this disrupt my CRO workflow? And I know you already acknowledged that the trial ecosystem is a bit complex. I think it's going to be very important, as we are seeing on the slide right now, multiple stakeholders, how we are orchestrating the right design, making sure that we are not disrupting the existing processes, but we are able to make sure that we are able to leverage the best of all stakeholders out there.
Absolutely agree. And I think one of the key points is aligning the interest of all these key players. And to do that, one of the main points is understand what are the interests. So, and we do think that an important point of that is delivered by research. And actually at DT, we started doing some research, especially on clinical sites. And 4 years ago, we launched what we call DT Tracker, which is a survey launched to those actively recruiting sites globally, which we try to understand what was the level of digital adoption, but also the areas of digital adoption and the key technologies that were being adopted. And to be clear, this research was initiated during COVID. And finished, didn't finish because the last wave was 1 year ago, and the last one is actually live right now. So we will have more data coming out soon. And basically what we saw is that during COVID, there was a huge uptake of technologies. So from February 21, in which we saw that only 57% of clinical sites were using digital tools, we now have in July 2022, 80% of clinical sites adopting it. And I can tell you that I had a glimpse of the new data for July 23, and that 80% is sticking there. So I think we kind of reached an interesting plateau right now. And what is interesting is this plateau is actually referring very much to the patient-facing technologies and to the recruitment tools especially. But it's still those technologies that are supporting the internal operation of sites and or retention, they're still increasing. So it's like for those patient technologies, it looks like there is now a plateau, and there is no improvement on the scalability of these technologies across sites globally. So there is clearly a need of supporting the sites in this aspect, especially for those patient recruitment tools, and we will be discussing that in a minute. What is interesting is that this, if I may add just something else to this topic, is that patient-facing tools goes online with what clinical trial sites are seeing as a main challenge, which is understanding what are patient requirements. So this is to them a real challenge to the adoption of technologies, which was, it's clearly seen here. There are really increasing concerns about the ability of patients to use digital tools, while the other two main challenges, which are the finding of the right tools and the cost of technologies, remain more or less unchanged. So Deepak, I know we've been discussing this data for a long time, and I don't know if you want to add something to it, especially on the recruitment part.
Sure. So there are multiple new technologies out there, especially post-pandemic. I think one question that many times sponsors ask themselves is that, should I deploy all of them in silos, or should I wait for the ideal state? I think the answer is it depends. If the objective is to let multiple activities run in parallel, almost in silos, so to speak, it will not disrupt the day-to-day effort, but the outcomes will be slightly less than what it could be. For example, there might be duplication of assets. There might be multiple touch points to the patients on reminders and customer satisfaction surveys and so on. But when we compare that with the status quo, data tells us that even this scenario is far better than the alternative of inaction, because 80% of clinical trials do not complete recruitment on time. So I'll rather put my efforts and be in the top 20% of that bucket, even if the ROI calculations are not perfect. What is important is we take this research in stride and try to design as optimum as possible, but acting on these research insights and being able to deploy is more important than the status quo.
Definitely. And so I'll leave you to continue on the recruitment part, which I think it's quite an important part of the discussion today.
Sure, Francisca, thanks. So before I share our experience with the sponsors on this, I would like to draw our attention to a recent McKinsey report that is startling because it shows the demand versus supply gap for clinical trial participants. The two numbers that you are seeing on the screen. I know it is not the best phrase, but for the sake of objectivity, let's say the demand of patient is X for clinical trials. So naturally, the supply of patients should be many-fold of the demand, because historically, we have seen only 3 to 6% of patients have enrolled in a clinical trial. Theoretically, it can be 100% but because of multiple factors, the patient might be staying very far from the research site, or there could be very good standard of care available. It will never be 100%. But what we are seeing right now, and what is shocking is that the supply of potential trial participants is actually less than the demand. So it is impossible to recruit enough patients if we continue to focus and continue to operate in the current swim lanes. What I mean by that is focusing only in the US as a geography, or focusing on existing trial designs or existing set of sites. So we really need to broaden the horizon. There is a lot of push on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I still believe we are in day one of decentralized trial. It holds a lot of promise, but the paperless and fully decentralized trial and all the initiatives connected with it will allow us to ease the pressure or the imbalance between the demand and the supply of clinical trials.
Yeah, I think these are pretty shocking numbers. I have some further insights in a few minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, because I think we need to ask ourselves these tough questions. When we look at this data, it's the writing is on the wall, as they say. And we need to ask these questions from ourselves and as well as with the CRO. We will not set ourselves for success unless we are able to, take the self-reported feasibility questionnaires on face value. So we need to stop doing that. We need a stronger integration with the insights that we are getting with at the site level through the CRM integration. I know we will touch upon site CRM and the accessibility of that data in real time, but these are all strong indicators for us to set ourselves for success.
Absolutely. When I see this number, I'm kind of surprised because we have all these amazing tools for digital recruitment, but they're not delivering, right? And I'm just showing here some of the results of the patient surveys that we did in 2021, in which we basically estimated that 73% of patients become aware of clinical trials on face-to-face visits with their GPs. And even more worryingly, all touch points throughout the trials, they don't use digital technology. They mostly use traditional methods, face-to-face, telephone, probably emails is the only kind of digital tool that is used the most. So, and I'm wondering what is going wrong, And yesterday I was reading this very interesting paper on trials, the Trials Journal, in which they actually show that all digital recruitment tools, they're actually there to improve the awareness, generally the awareness of the trial, but they're not focused on recruiting participants directly. They're not, they're not addressing patients directly. So only 2% of them does. And only 20% are actually tools that are made for clinical sites to recruit patients. So maybe that can be part of the problem. Maybe just raising awareness at that general level is not delivering what it should deliver. And also, I think that enabling clinical sites to improve recruitment is quite of a crucial point here. And I think it's one of the major points of our discussion. So I think also from other research that is around there, we know that digital recruitment is actually for sites one of these underutilized methodology that requires supports from sponsors, not only financially, but also operationally to be effective.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you raised, Francisca. Also because when it comes to oncology and rare diseases, the human element is so crucial and often overlooked. So We can talk about the importance of digital tools as much as we would like to, but on ground, the change management part is so important, and that is where I think designing the right workflow for patients, caregivers, and the site personnel becomes so important. For example, we conducted a recruitment rate analysis and competitive intelligence supported with a site identification dashboard for a non-small cell lung cancer trial, which helped immensely in finding new sites outside the US. And the recruitment and analysis was used by the VP of clinical operations and other leaders at the sponsor end to level set the expectation around the timelines of completion with site personnel. And basis that, they were also able to leverage nurse coordinators, which became an important aspect of the patient recruitment workflow. So while we are talking about leveraging digital touch points, I think it's very important for us to take a step back and look at how we are going to orchestrate the digital experience. Can we have a human in the loop? Many times, that make all the difference in terms of making the most of the use of the digital tools that we are planning to implement.
Absolutely. It looks like there is a total disconnection, right, from, that study design that could deliver really, if you think about the quality by design approach, if you would implement that at the design level with a good communication with the executors, with clinical sites, definitely you could reach a much better result for sure. Yeah. So I'm here. I wanted to show you something else here for related to the same survey, and I think we've seen this together before. But basically, in this plot, we have analyzed the level of usage of technologies versus the evaluation of the impactfulness of those technologies by sites. And and what we see here is there is a disconnection in the usage versus how much they value these technologies, which is kind of surprising because generally the more technologies are used, the more they are liked. Well, this year is not the case, so it's quite an exceptional sector. And I think one of the things that stands out is that whether recruitment channels are used by 40 to 50% of sites, the same percentage of sites, they don't think that they're impactful enough. So certainly there is a huge marginal improvement on what these recruitment channels can deliver. And adding to that, real-world data and real-world evidence, which actually could support recruitment also a lot, are used at a very, very low level. And I think this is also something to point out. And I know we will be talking about the real-world data impact on clinical trials later, but I think this graph, it really shows how much can be done for clinical sites in supporting them.
Absolutely. And I think this is a very interesting analysis, as you called, right? The importance versus the adoption. We were able to look at these insights because the right tracking was in place. So again, goes on to show the importance of KPI tracking, which helps us beyond just the return on investment calculation. For example, in this case, another example that comes to my mind is in a trial for lumbar disc herniation, where we, along with other recruitment vendors, were maintaining a joint dashboard. And we realized that we could use that dashboard to identify bottlenecks at a site level through that tracking. So I think it's so vital, and again, often overlooked. The adoption of digital technologies and the associated ROI calculation becomes so vital in designing the next trial and the trial portfolio as well.
I think I have an interesting question here that just popped out. I think the question is, when it comes to digital recruitment, which approaches are available, and accordingly to your experience, which one are the most successful, and the one that sponsors CROs are using the most?
Yeah, I think as we have seen in our experience, and also the research tells us that when it comes to digital recruitment, there are multiple initiatives which are currently being taken up. The last mile of connectivity of patient is, so to speak, a low-hanging fruit, where leveraging social media and online searches, being able to reach out to the patients and caregiver to solve for the awareness is very important. And what we were discussing a few minutes ago about leveraging real world data and real world evidence also is becoming increasingly important. Um, I think in relative order of importance, it is vital for us to analyze that for a particular therapy area and for a certain geography, which of these recruitment initiatives we would like to pick up and the intensity with which we would like to deploy. All of these need not be deployed for all the sites and all the countries in question. For example, in Europe, there is a lot of focus on focusing on the HCP as an angle for a referral path, whereas in US, we appreciate that through the site network, for example, in oncology, leveraging community oncology and the real world data that comes along with it in oncology trials that can be leveraged in an accelerated manner. So it depends on the therapy area and the geography in scope. And again, it's important for us to track, do A/B test, and see how we would like to increase the adoption of these digital technologies.
And if I may add something to this question, there is also an important point here, which is about measuring the efficiency of tools. So we really right now don't. I think it's difficult to comment on which are the most successful strategy. Again, it is, as you said, dependent on many other factors. But I think also there are very few studies in which the efficiency of tools is really measured. It's more about measuring overall the recruitment rate, the retention rate, but the efficiency of tool is something that is somehow overlooked, and it's still very important, especially when evaluating new strategies.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think rather than getting stuck in measuring the importance of each and every channel, what we should really strive for is having the benchmark in place and improve the outcome from there on. And again, that will also set us for success in a portfolio approach. So if we know that for a certain oncology trial, few recruitment strategies have clicked, chances are that it can be easily scaled in a portfolio manner as well. But as far as we are tracking the before and after and making progress overall, without disrupting what the CRO could be doing, for example, in an offline environment, but making sure that those digital initiatives are actually adding real value on ground, I think that is what the sponsor should strive for.
Definitely. And so moving on with our points of discussion, I think we have only 7 minutes left, so we'll go to the next slide. And again, we touched again on the importance of assessing and measuring the experience of the different participants to the trials, including clinical sites, etc. So one of the things that we've done embedded in the survey that I just presented earlier, the DT tracker, we have asked sites what were the major driver of experience with sponsors, the key factors that for them are important in that relationship with sponsors delivers on the success of the trial. And there were 3 key factors that to them are very important, which are technical support, flexibility, and information completeness. So it seems obvious, but I think it's not, especially the flexibility factor is not so easy to achieve. And in fact, when we calculated what we call the CXQ score based on these factors, the score didn't reach even a good level. It was in between poor and fair, with a score of 35. And this includes around 450 clinical sites actively recruiting globally. So I think that's that's alarming. So it means that the relationship with the clinical sites can be really, really improved, and especially treated much more differently than what it is now, because at all effects, clinical sites are customers of pharma. So there should be a total different level of engagement around it. And I think we've discussed many times, even with clients and with stakeholders across the industry, the importance of having a CRM for clinical sites and building the experience around them. So I think that's a very, very important topic. What do you think, Deepak?
Completely agree, Francisca. You and I have discussed this in many other discussions in the past. In fact, the site tracker survey, through which we have been tracking the experience of sites during pandemic, post-pandemic, also throws very interesting insights on this topic. I think an integrated CRM which takes into consideration the responses and the experience from sites as well as end users, the participants, and making it really seamless can have tremendous impact in terms of the final outcome. From an AC perspective, I think it does not matter. It can be the CRO or even a digital recruitment partner like Indegene, or a centralized team at the sponsor end, monitoring the flow of patients and sites through this integrated platform. But what this platform allows us is a strong foundation through which we are able to capture the feedback and the impact of the innovation, and all the new initiatives can then be deployed easily on top of it. We are hearing on a weekly basis around innovation on generative AI, on customer satisfaction trackers, and site CRM related performance tracking. All of that can be very easily embedded into a foundational CRM. So that becomes really core to what we should think of deploying.
Yeah, and I think there should be in developing this system, there should be a level of collaboration also with the clinical operations sides of company, and co-develop the solutions with them. I think it's quite important as well for the adoption uptake of these technologies. And
that's a great point. And not just the clinical development, clinical operations as well as clinical development. This kind of platform allows us to bridge the gap between both the teams as well, and potentially even the commercial teams. Why not? Because once those insights are generated, although there are Chinese walls between the clinical and commercial teams, but in the long run and for the benefit of once the drug is launched, those insights can certainly flow from one team to another.
Definitely. I think this is going to be really important also for those pharmaceutical companies that have complex pipelines, or they have different therapeutic areas in which they need to expand the clinical sites reach to move on in the clinical trial process from phase 3 to approval. Yeah. So something else to add to this, and I think this is gonna be the last research slide that we have. So on the basis of that score, of the CXQ score, we did an extra analysis on the responses that we had from the clinical sites. And we actually could see that those clinical sites that had the best experience with sponsors also use technologies in a totally different way. And they actually use more advanced technologies such as patient NHCP relationship management portals and real-world data, clinical trial analytics solutions. And this ranking is completely different from the usage that you have on average. So best relationship with sponsor actually improve the adoption of technology. So I think this is quite an important slide. I was actually very surprised to see it. I was not expecting such a huge difference. So I think we have to remember that. And I think one other important point is that we need to keep measuring these metrics, because with time we could see things switching in between technologies, and it's important also to understand those trends.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, let me see, because I think we have another question. So we have a question on rare diseases, which I think is quite important. What are the collaboration challenges with investigators and CROs, which are specific to rare diseases?
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic. I think the fundamentals of digital recruitment work very different when it comes to rare diseases and to a certain extent oncology as well. The core principle of carpet bombing or mass outreach of digital marketing for chronic conditions, for example, does not apply to rare diseases. It becomes very important that it's a close-knit community. When it comes to rare diseases, patients, CROs, investigators, and for all the right reason, we see niche CRO providers that are more often than not delivering successful results when it comes to rare disease. I think just building on to that, it becomes important that when sponsors are looking for collaboration in that space, they are able to leverage the expertise, the specific expertise of the CROs as well as those investigators. And a subtle point, but very important, is when the trial recruitment activities are being designed, it becomes important to ensure that there is a clean way to be able to attribute the success of recruitment, whether that is coming from offline activity, let's say some event around rare disease patient awareness, or online activity. And for that purpose, it is prudent to also engage with digital recruitment providers with proven expertise in the rare disease area. As I mentioned, it all becomes expertise driven when it comes to operating in the rare disease areas.
No, I totally agree with that. And yeah, I think the challenge of rare diseases is even bigger when it comes to decentralized trials, and all those technologies become even more important, because if you think that you have a smaller pool of patients, largely children, these are largely pediatric diseases, right? So it is a challenge not only for the participant, but also for the all carers around it. So that those connections and that level of support needs to be higher. And in a way, I also think, and I remember discussing that as well with one of our clients, it's also a sort of trial bench for pharma companies in having this holistic approach on customer experience. Because if you think about it, the HCPs that are actually curing and treating patients and give access to key drugs, they're also the ones that would be important as KOLs or as investigators, because of the rarity, the nature of these diseases and how it is difficult to recruit patients. So I think that's an important topic. So I think that part on customer experience becomes even more important in this case. And also, I think another key player on the area of rare diseases that needs to be taken into account are patient advocacy groups, which can not only give access to patients, but also importantly also to insights, and improve greatly the study design of these orphan drugs trials. So there are different things from rare diseases to chronic conditions, as you said. And I think they have to be treated in a different way. But at the same time, I think the standard if you have the standards in place for rare diseases, in a way, you also have some lessons learned for other type of trials, I think.
Yeah, and that always works. I mean, going by the basics and ensuring that given the limited patient pool, to your point, having a close watch on the competition in that space also is important, because there are limited investigators. So it becomes vital that while we continue to engage as many investigators as possible, if they are already engaged or the site is already engaged with a similar trial for rare disease, it's probably important to then diversify or de-risk the strategy while continue to engage with those HCPs and those investigators. But these are all important factors given the limited patient population which is available when it comes to rare diseases.
Definitely. So I think we have 10 minutes left for more questions. anybody that wants to add up to the discussion, or any comments, any other insightful thoughts?
Here's one more question, Francisca, around based on your experience, what are the technologies that require more support from sponsors? Do they include e-consent, EPROs, or others? What do you think?
Okay, so that's again a very interesting one. I can take that. So EPROs and e-consent, accordingly to the DT Tracker survey that we launch every 6 months, are one of the most adopted technologies, which is interesting. I think these are part of those technologies that could be used more if they had the support from sponsors. They are in that mid ground. For which the support is needed. They are there, but if they would receive more support from sponsors, they would be used more. So that's really what I think. Together, similarly to recruitment channels, but also similarly to remote monitoring tools. So some of the, I think there are 3 levels of technologies for sites. There are one that are core to them and that they anyway have it. The one that they have, but they are not used, and they could be used more if they had more financial and operational support, and those that they need to be completely supplied externally by sponsors. So I think these fit in the mid ground, I think, but I don't know, Deepak, what do you think?
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think it becomes important, like you said, the ability and the willingness of the sites to be able to adopt to those technologies. My only additional comment to this would be that sponsors should not get overwhelmed in taking up the responsibility of driving the adoption of all of these tools. And that is where partnering closely with digital recruitment providers, making sure that some of these initiatives, if they are being deployed in a centralized manner, then making sure that those sites are able to adopt to it in a comfortable manner. They have the adequate support and training to be able to do that. And sometimes having a plan B in place also helps. For example, we have a technology for warm site handover where the sites can automatically schedule patient visits. 80% of the sites are able to adopt to that comfortably, but those who have any apprehensions, there are tools and processes to be able to adopt to that. But if they are not comfortable doing that, then having an option of an offline mode of communication has been helpful in our experience in the past. So I think sponsors also need to realize it and have the alternatives ready. And again, collaboration with the recruitment partners and CROs to be able to drive that will free up bandwidth for sponsors to do more.
I think we have an additional very interesting question, Deepak. So as a sponsor, should I run digital engagement initiatives trial by trial or centrally?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question indeed. I think there are pros and cons to both. When we are talking about deploying these engagement initiatives, of course, there are budgetary constraints to it. But what I would suggest is when we are looking at a particular trial, it's probably a better idea to look at the trial portfolio and being able to measure the impact of those initiatives over a period of time is more important. So if that means that, let's say if I'm a small biotech organization with only a couple of trials in my basket right now, we should still be very mindful of how am I going to measure the impact of that. So out of my 10 sites, maybe I'll deploy it initially to 5 sites, being able to see the impact and then deploy it. Of course, there are benefits of deploying these things centrally from a process perspective, from a control perspective, and then to be able to deploy that in a more holistic manner. but it's also important. Very often we also need to, as we were discussing in some of these digital technologies in the previous question, that how do I measure the impact of it? So it's absolutely fine to be able to deploy it in a trial or a geography perspective in those cases. That's my view.
Okay, and I think we have another question. We also have the wrap-up slide we have to go through, I think, with the key tips that we've put together. But I think before that, we have another question, and it's about any tip and strategy to enforce a digital recruitment model with my CRO if my trial is already underway.
This is a good question again. And I think we are planning to cover some of these aspects in the conclusion that we have. So we have divided that into 4 different sections. Maybe I can take that up in the first part of the conclusion. Yeah. So defining the best practices for new patient-facing digital tools, it becomes very important that even if the trial is underway and the CRO has already picked on that project, some of the solutions to be able to drive that successfully in that scenario could be to keep the recruitment line items in a modular aspect in the SOW with the CRO. If the SOW is already in place, then understanding that CRO's recruitment activity in detail, ask as many clarification questions as possible. It will help you down the line, especially if the trial is already undergoing, then making sure that the CRO appreciates that it is okay to enable collaboration with complementary recruitment channels down the line, and they are flexible to do that. And we have already spoken about ensuring the KPI tracking is in place from day one. So that becomes core to any clinical trial or any CRO collaboration, irrespective of the stage of the clinical trial.
Absolutely. And I think another key takeaway, as we said, is facilitate the use of advanced technologies to clinical sites, real world data, but also advanced analytics, etc. So I think it is important to support them and co-invest in site level infrastructure and understand their needs. Also, considering the flexibility level that is required, and also proactively address data sharing and privacy concerns from site, which is also, as we know, one issue.
Yes, and we have discussed a lot in today's session around making sure that there is clear and transparent communication across stakeholders, specifically with investigators and staff. It is vital that they are treated as equal and valuable partner in this ecosystem, not just the enablers or the execution arm. And leveraging site level CRM and many qualitative insights that come at a site level with the real-time KPI tracking is bound to give us very positive results.
Yeah, and I think discussed previously, all this starts with assessing and measuring. So it is important to manage company-wide adoption of measurement with discipline and efficiency. So this needs to be regular efforts. Assessment of CX throughout standardized frameworks and analysis of gap and roadmap creation. So I think that's for us the main take-home message here. I think, okay, we've reached basically the end of the webinar, just 45 minutes. And so thank you everybody for participating. And if you have any other questions, or if you want to have access to more research findings, then please contact us and we will be happy to provide that. So thank you very much. And thank you, Deepak.
Thank you very much, Francisca. It was a great discussion. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks.